Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be covering a free Photoshop alternative named Gimp. Now I've already covered programs such as Krita and Pixlr, but Gimp definitely takes the top spot in regards to free alternatives when it comes to Photoshop. It offers many of the same functions as Photoshop, though granted they aren't as streamlined or as easy to access. For example, in Photoshop, creating a clipping mask is as simple as right-click and doing create clipping mask. There are a couple more steps you need to take in Gimp to accomplish the same effect, but overall it works just as well. Now I'll be using the following template, which is from a past tutorial that I uploaded rather recently for this demonstration because it covers a nice array of features that you might be using when it comes to Gimp. So when you open up Gimp, the first thing you're going to see is this lovely little creature in this section right here, and that is all we really need to know about the program. I'm just kidding. Gimp has a fairly similar layout to Photoshop, so it won't be overly confusing when you're switching between the two. Now granted, the functions of the tools are going to be different, as well as some of the layouts, but overall you can see we have our layers over here, and we can see that same thing with Photoshop. We have our layers, properties, characters, brush settings. This is all customizable. Same thing with Gimp, brush, patterns, fonts, and I really haven't touched this at the moment. I just downloaded Gimp and am running it fresh off the install. Left side we have all of our little tools, and once again Photoshop has the similar layout right over there. And finally, the top section, which is pretty standard across all softwares, and I really didn't need to take the time to mention it. Alright, so I went ahead and opened up the file in Gimp, and it's as simple as going to File, Open. I didn't show that process because I don't feel like taking the time to blur out files, but it's really simple, and here we are. Now as you can see, similar to Krita, it did not keep the clipping masks that we created in Photoshop. So most of you who don't have Photoshop but are downloading the templates I have uploaded with the videos, you're going to come across this problem. Now this could be rather time consuming if you're working on stuff like the cute banner style, which is the one with the giant events tag and the little drips and the thing on top with the pinks and the purples. That one involves a lot of clipping, so it would be a bit more time consuming to get it back into a form where you could edit from. But overall, just the fact that this is free and offers all of this is absolutely amazing, and it's well worth it when you consider how much you're getting for what you're paying, which is nothing. So we're going to start off by showing you how to do this clipping mask. I'm going to go to the center section, open the base. As you can see, each of these little lines are not clipped, which they should be. And I just want to mention, I really appreciate that they have the colored little folders here, and it kept the same colors I used in Photoshop. Hope to keep ourselves organized. So we're going to start off with this first rectangle here. What we want to do is hold Alt and then click on this rectangle there. Now you can see this entire rectangle has now been highlighted. Now we're going to right click on the rectangle we're currently on. Keep in mind we're still on this rectangle right here on that layer, and we simply Alt clicked onto the thumbnail of this one right there. So now we're going to right click on that layer, add layer mask, make sure you do selection and hit add. As you can see, the reason we highlighted this one down here is it created a selection of it, and so when we added that layer mask, it now clipped itself to that selection. Now we can do the same thing up here, add layer mask, go over to selection and click add. One more time, add layer mask, selection, and add. And that is absolutely perfect. It is now all clipped on as we want it to be. Now we can do the same thing with our stickers. We go to the blue square, go to our believe it is this one right here, our model. And we'll go to our model and hold Alt click there, right click in the model, add layer mask selection, and voila, she is back into the frame. A couple quick things to note to actually zoom in and out. Of course, you can go to this corner right here and do that there, but that is very inefficient and time consuming. Instead, you can hold Control and scroll in and out with your mouse, and you'll accomplish the same effect. In Photoshop, we used Alt to do that, but that's not really much of a difference there. To create a new layer, it's this plus sign down here. We're going to simply hit plus. We have a bunch of different options. We're just going to keep that, click OK, and we now have a new layer, and we can just drag this around just like you can do in Photoshop. I don't know the hotkeys for this one. For example, in Photoshop, you could do Control G to group a layer. Here, we can do New Layer Group, and that works exactly the same. Then from there, we can just drag in the layer, right click on the eyeball, and we can go ahead and make this, let's say, brown. And there we go. This one is now color coded and brown. We can double click to change names, just like Photoshop. So most of what you hear me saying in Photoshop, aside from the hotkeys, you have to figure out on your own what those would be, and I do recommend you YouTube a much more detailed tutorial for Gimp. This is just a quick overlook as to how you can use it with the templates I upload to the channel. Deleting a layer is simple as well. We have this delete layer button, and Photoshop has that same thing as well. Click on a layer, it has a delete, though I believe we can also hit delete on the keyboard. No, we cannot. So we can right click delete layer, or just click that if we don't want something, Control Z to undo. Now I don't see any shape tools in here like Photoshop has, but what we can do instead is, for example, we need a circle, go to the Ellipse Tool. As you can see, if I just drag normally without holding anything down except for left mouse button, it's going to create very unproportionate shapes. Now if we hold Shift, that's going to remain proportionate, and that is something that is similar to Photoshop, where you have to hold a button down to switch between the two. So we can click that down. In Photoshop, I could do Shift F5 and choose Fill, but here we can go to the more standard method, go into the bucket tool and clicking. Naturally, the color options are right over here, and just like Photoshop, we can switch around to whatever we desire. Anyway, that's a circle. Obviously, the same thing can be done with a rectangle. I can click just like that, come over to the paint bucket, and drop that down. Though it does appear there is some space in the center where it did not line up correctly. I wonder what happens if we click Fill Hole Selection. And yeah, that fixed it. So if you go over to this left side, you can choose between different options as to how to fill it. In Photoshop, what you might see me sometimes do is do Control T and free transform. While Gimp does not have a one-to-one conversion of the free transform tool, which I'd access in Photoshop by doing Control T. Quick example being this, Control T. Now I can take this dot and do whatever I want with it, resizing, all kinds of wonky stuff. They do have a perspective tool by going to Tools, Transform Tools, and Perspective. Now I don't 100% understand how to use this one. It seems a bit wonky to me. Don't understand what's going on here. It looks more like I'm adjusting all of its sides. Oh, that is beautiful. Look at that creature. Anyway, what we can do instead is go to Tools, Transform Tools, and use each of these. So we can rotate this, for example, or we can go to Transform Tools and go over to Move, and naturally just move this somewhere else. So it's not quite as simple as Photoshop with that free transform tool and all of its adjustments there, but considering it's free, it does a lot for you. Now you might notice there's this annoying thing going on that no matter what I select is being moved, and we do not want that. So if we come over to this left side, you see tool toggle, and it's currently on pick a layer or guide. And what this is going to do is any layer we select, that's the one it's going to edit, and we do not want that for stuff like this. Because you saw I went to adjust this, but I accidentally grabbed the one behind it and it moved that instead. So we'll pick move the active layer. Now if I try to adjust that one, it's only moving the partner logo because that is the one I am currently on. Now adding a stroke to a object in Gimp is also not quite as simple as it is in Photoshop, and strangely enough, it's a bit more difficult than it is in Krita as well. Krita had a system much more similar to Photoshop, where I could right-click on a layer, go to blending options, and I would have all of these settings laid out for me. Meanwhile, in Gimp, we first have to select our layer. As you can see, our layer is now selected. Then we go to Edit, come down to Stroke Selection, and keep in mind the color it's going to use for solid color is the one we have as our primary color over here in the top left. And we currently have it at 6. Let's bring it down to 4 and click Stroke. As you can see, a stroke has now been applied to that layer. For the last little tutorial of the day for a tool you'd be using within Gimp is how you'd go about making these cutouts, or essentially delete a selection. So you can see here we still have this shape selected, and unlike Photoshop where you could just hit delete on the keyboard, and I'm not sure if you can hear that, but I am clicking delete and nothing is happening. We instead have a couple options. 1, edit, cut, pretty simple, or 2, take our eraser and erase over all of that. Now in the case of this cutout, we could simply merge each of these down, and then we can select it. As you can see, all of these little circles are now selected, and we can just come over and erase, obviously not on the layer where the cutout actually is, but onto the layer you want deleted. So let's say we have this one right here. Let's go ahead and merge layer group. And if we come across and just erase, or even more simply just do cut, and we hide the cutout, we have the same exact effect as if it was in Photoshop with a simple delete. Now that's really all I'll go over today. I highly recommend, if you plan to use Gimp, you search up a more detailed tutorial, and there are way more than you could ever need on YouTube. This was simply meant to show you how to quickly get started. If you just download a template from the channel, you don't have Photoshop, but you want to jump right into editing. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have an awesome day, and I have another video popping up soon to this tutorial right here, so that you can test out exactly what I did here on your own.